Right, so in this video we're going to be looking at different ways to color grade your footage using built-in effects in After Effects. So if you go to the project files, you'll find a file called colorgrading.mp4, and let's drag that into our project window in After Effects, and then let's drag that into a new composition. Okay, so the first way to color grade your footage is to add a curves adjustment. So let's just right click on our layer and go to Effect and go to color correction and then select curves. Now with curves you can actually do quite a bit. So first of all, you can create an S-curve which will basically just give you some extra contrast to your footage. And then let's say we want to remove some of the red in this footage because there's quite a bit of red going on here. So right here at the top where it says RGB, we're going to change that to only work with the red channel. And then we're just going to pull that down slightly and you'll see that the red will actually go away. And then what we can do is we can boost the blue a little bit. So let's select blue and let's boost that slightly. And then let's go back to RGB and just adjust our S-curve not to be too contrasty. Okay, something like that. So let's disable this effect and see the difference. So that's the original shot and that's with the S-curve adjustment. Another thing that I also use when doing color grading is the tint effect. So if you go to color correction and you go all the way down to tint, this will basically remove all the saturation if it's set to 100%, and if you bring this down, the saturation will slowly come back. So usually you just want to remove some of the saturation if you're shooting with something like a DSLR, just to get a little bit more of a film look. So let's adjust this to around, let's say around 20% of a tint. And if I just toggle between this, you'll see it will just remove some of the saturation and it will look a little bit better. So let's disable these two effects and let's see what other effects we have to change some of the colors. So if we go to color correction, you can actually use the brightness and contrast, which is just a really quick way of adjusting the brightness of your clip and also the contrast. Okay, let's delete that effect and let's see what else we have. Let's go to color correction, and then we've got exposure as well, which is very similar to the brightness effect. And this will basically adjust your exposure. You can also go into the negative values if you want to bring the exposure down. So this can also come in very handy. Let's delete that. Okay, let's add another effect. Let's go to color correction, and then we've got hue and saturation. So this is basically if you want to boost or take some of the saturation away in your scene. So if you change this to a positive value, you'll see that the saturation will increase, and you can also take that into the negative values and that will decrease. Very similar than the tint effect. This will also give you some other controls like the master lightness. You can also colorize it using some of these hue and saturation and lightness controls here at the bottom. Okay, I'm not really going to get into that, so let's remove that one. And let's enable our curves and tint again to get back to this look. So just remember that color grading is not always a correct look. It's just a style that you apply to your video. So you can go with any style you like. Color correction is more where you try and fix some of your video, like the white balance, etc. But we're gonna not really go into color correction. This is more about styling and getting a specific look to your video. Another thing that you can do to add some style to your video is to add a vignette. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So basically what you want to do is go to your layers here at the bottom and right click new and create a new adjustment layer. Okay, just make sure that that adjustment layer is above your footage, and then we're going to add a curves adjustment to that layer. So right click on your adjustment layer, go to effects, go to color correction, and then click on curves. Okay, before we actually change any settings on this curve adjustment, we want to add an ellipse mask to this composition. So go to the top, select your ellipse tool, and then just double click on your ellipse tool icon, and that will create an ellipse that will actually fit your composition. And then we can adjust our curves adjustment. Alright, so we're just going to pull this down a little bit just to make it a bit darker, something like that. And then we want to invert this mask so it will only affect the outside area of the mask. So go down to your mask, and right next to the mask you'll see inverted. Tick that and you'll see that it will only affect the outside. Then we also need to feather this mask, so go into the mask settings and let's change the feather amount to around 250. Press enter. Okay, let's just see the difference when I disable this. So that's the basics of color grading using After Effects, and I'll see you guys in the next video.